So, hello there, story seekers. We are here, still here, in fact, with the wonderful, handsome, and talented Nick Pullen. Nick,
Hello.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
It's just
So
coming at me like a freight train. Yeah, let's go.
it is. It's nothing but violence. What's the first story you wrote that meant something to you?
Interesting question. That I wrote. Interesting. I mean, I've been writing since I was a little kid. So there's a bunch of like childish little short stories. Then there was a long dark period where I didn't write anything. I think the first one that I was sort of rediscovering myself as a writer in my mid to late 20s and getting serious about craft. And I think the first one I got published was called Relapse Grinder, and that meant a lot because it meant that somebody had actually connected with my work and it landed. But I think the one that meant the most by far is Famous Blue, which was a short story I wrote that I had published. It actually came third in the Toronto Star Short Story Contest in 2019, and that one was the most significant because it gave, like, winning that prize and winning a little bit of money. I was disappointed I came third because I'd already spent the first prize money in my head. But winning that prize and getting something published in the Toronto Star, which is one of the biggest newspapers in Canada, that was when I was like, okay, I can get serious about this. This is something I can actually do. Like, if I sink in the time and the effort, then maybe, just maybe, I have a shot at doing this for real. So that's what I'd say was the one that meant the most.
That's a nice answer. Yeah,
Validation's a hell of a drug, isn't it?
Validation's the best drug. Oh, it's heady shit. Yeah.
External validation, should we say? Because internal validation can be a little bit of like, if that's a drug, it's an opiate, you know.
It was also a deeply personal story,
right?
That really drew on a lot of lived experience and a particular friendship that I had that I had really kind of bared my soul in it. So to have someone see a story that raw and that personal and go, this is good enough that we're going to publish it nationally. That meant a lot. It was terrifying, but it meant a lot. And you can actually still read it. It's still on the Toronto Star website.
Excellent. Well, we will do. I mean, do you think that's why it did so well and it sort of kicked you off in this very sort of validating way, because you had bared yourself entirely?
I do. I think that was a big part of it. I mean, I think because the risk was so great.
Yes. Yeah.
The reward was all the sweeter, you know.
Boxing clever with stories just doesn't. At least for me, it really does not work. I think if you try and hold stuff back, people know that you're holding stuff back.
Yeah, people are connecting, because fundamentally what people are connecting with is the emotional resonance, right? They're connecting with you. Like, this is why AI art is just never going to be a thing, because people are looking for connection with another human being, right? And that's not, like, a computer will never provide that. Doesn't matter how sophisticated it is.
I guess we're sort of talking about voice here, aren't we? That's sort of like what people typically assign to that. Like, I think it's I often thought, I think for a while I confused voice with style.
Yeah.
And tried to build a style that was mine. But I think you sort of recognize that if you've got a voice, then you can write in whatever the fuck style you want. Like, it doesn't. You can, obviously, it might not sell as well because people get used to one particular thing that you're doing. But yeah,
I like that. Yeah, and it's true, because, like, a voice can be modulated through various different techniques and styles and themes and settings. Like a voice can, like, you know, it's, I guess what comes to mind is just like an actor, right? Like, like Daniel Day-Lewis is performing all of these wildly diverse characters, but the thread that's holding them all together is that he's Daniel Day-Lewis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like his voice as an actor is beyond any one of his characters.
Whenever anybody mentions Daniel Day-Lewis, I just replay the entirety of There Will Be Blood in my head. It just
it's
such a good film.
Oh, it's spectacular. I mean, my favorite is I don't think it's the best movie he was in, but it's my favorite character of his is Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York.
Oh, Gangs of New
York. I
yeah.
love that movie so much, but the best part about it is him, and just the raw animal terror that he evokes.
100%.
That monologue he gives.
Yes, I was just about to say that's
civilization
the bit,
is crumbling.
Yeah.
Oh.
I cut out the eye that looked away. Yeah.
Impressionable young me watched that and never stopped watching Daniel Day-Lewis after that point.
Yeah, me too, 100%.
Yeah. So, I think we may have already answered this question because we've spoken about your book already in the last episode, and we've just mentioned a couple of your short stories as well. But is there anywhere that you would recommend that the folks listening actually start reading your work? Would you prefer they start with a short story, or do you think they should go straight to your novel?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I would go. It really depends on what you're looking for, because my short stories are quite literary. They're not really. It depends what you want, because the Black Hunger is a gothic, queer, epistolary, historical horror thing. It's a genre work, and it has literary elements, but they're really two different beasts, right? So I think Famous Blue. They're also quite older. They're all a little older now, right? I mean, it was 5 years ago that I wrote both of them, and I have other things that are coming down the pipeline that I think maybe I've grown a bit as a writer since I wrote those two things. But if you're interested in my literary work, yeah, go see the Famous Blue short story, and hopefully we're going to put the novel version of that on submission this winter.
Exciting!
I'm just putting the finishing touches on the edits to the novel version of Famous Blue, and we're going to start submitting it to publishers probably in January, like after Christmas. So that's one entry point. But if you're more interested in my genre work, then just go buy the Black Hunger, because it's a more finished, rich, deep. There's just more to it, So I'm indifferent.
I will say also awesome cover art as well. And I know you shouldn't.
Oh, gorgeous, isn't it?
Cover, but so pretty. Yeah, really nice.
The American cover. Sorry?
So say, in case any of these mad people haven't listened to the previous episode, where can they buy these books, by the way?
The Black Hunger you can buy pretty much anywhere. Books are sold. It's on the shelves in all the major bookstores in Canada, the US, Australia, the UK, New Zealand. You can order it online. It's on Amazon. You can order it direct from the website of any of the big box stores. Your indie bookstore, some of them might be stocking it. Some of them will request it if you order it. And I suppose what my publisher would want me to say is the best way to get it is to go direct to the Hachette website, right? Where you can get a pretty good price on it there, and they'll ship it to you directly. Actually, if you want an absolutely gorgeous hardcover edition signed, you can go to the Broken Binding, and they did a special hardcover edition that is just so. Ironically, I haven't held it yet. I haven't seen it. They still haven't delivered it to the Yukon, but you can buy it, and I actually signed 1,500 of those. So
how long did that take?
That took about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Like,
good grief.
Because there was no I thought that for sure there'd be some kind of shortcut, but no, they mailed me a box with 1,500 tip-ins, like individual sheets of paper, and I had to sign every single one by hand with a black Sharpie.
I remember famously George Martin signed via a robot hand at range, didn't he? Once, I think he was.
Did he really? That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there was no shortcut here. What I did was I would just kind of throw on an old movie and just sort of get into a groove where I'd sign like a couple hundred just while watching a movie and thinking of something else. And,
I wonder if people can tell what kind of like vibe the movie was from how your handwriting differs from the different sites.
That'd be an exercise in forensic reconstruction for sure.
Yeah. I actually have a question about the broken binding thing. So was that like an add-on that your publisher added, or were you like approached separately by broken binding, or
No, yeah, that was an add-on thing that the publisher did. So like what the way it works is when the editors, there's so much. It's really kind of strange, isn't it? Because as an author, you're just kind of sitting there writing the next book, but there's all this marketing and publicity stuff going on behind the scenes that your publisher is doing that you're not really aware of at all. It's like you're sitting on the iceberg and you don't know what's going on down below. But so one of the things they do is they shop around for box deals, right?
Yeah.
They try to get you into like there's a whole separate ecosystem of special edition and box deal companies that sort of curate selected works and send them out to their subscribers, right? And so, Evernight was one that we tried for, we didn't get. And there were probably others that I don't know about, but the Broken Binding was the one that was interested. And my editor emailed me one day to say they were doing it. And yeah, that was sort of, I don't know what happened really. It's like, I know that it was between my publisher and them, but it was definitely good news to get.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah.
So we have a new question here, which I'm gonna give over to Nico because he's better at asking questions than I am.
So, say hypothetically, there were two writers and they were being held hostage by a powerful and capricious bibliomancer, right? And that guy was just
a malevolent bibliomancer, yeah.
So just imagine, and this is definitely not a thing that's happening, that he was hell bent on getting the best stories he could for his magical library, right? What book would you recommend to that wizard, hypothetically?
Of all the books ever written.
If he did exist, he would be nodding at me right now.
Okay. Wow, that's. I can only go with what it would be for me personally, but I would tell him he needs Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Great shout.
I would live in that book if I could. I would wear it like a skin. I've read it like 15 times since I was 14, and yeah, I mean, I think if he wants the finest English fantasy novel of the 21st century, then it's got to be that.
Oh, yeah, that is an absolutely wonderful book.
Yeah.
I do sort of have this. I've obviously read it a couple of times and really enjoyed it, but I have a vague tick in the back of my mind because both Strange and Norrell and Pedido Street Station were recommended to me when I was a teenager. And
China Evil, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I knew better. I was like, oh no, I'll discover stuff on my own. And years later, I read them in my 20s, and I was like, fuck, I should have read these 10 years ago.
So you want to hear the most tragic thing? One of the most tragic things that's ever happened to me. I am only just now reading Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely tragic. But I'm glad.
So what happened was when I was a little kid, my parents, they were like, "Oh yeah, nerds like Nick are into this shit. Everyone's telling us about Terry Pratchett. Let's get him a Terry Pratchett book." When I was like 8 or 9, and they got me The Science of Discworld.
Oh.
It's like a meta novel about some fictional world that I didn't care about. So I was like, "What is this?" I was completely baffled by it, and I put it down without even finishing it. And now I'm reading like Guards and The Color of Magic and Mord, and I'm like, this. My whole life would have been different if they had just handed me like Guards.
Yeah.
Everything about my writing style, who I am, like I feel so betrayed, and I feel such grief that I didn't even get to read Terry Pratchett until he was dead, right?
Yeah. No, I will say I'm jealous though, because I would love to read them for the first time again.
Yeah,
I think that would be such a gift. So I get to live through you now, that's so true, vicariously.
Yeah, keep you updated. Yeah, I'm glad to have it ahead of me too. Like, I can already tell that he's one of those authors that if I could like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind him out of my head, like Tolkien, right? Like if I could read it, like my partner hadn't seen the Lord of the Rings movies or read any of the books. Don't even get me started. But to see them through his eyes, it was like, if I could rediscover this, like if I could just have this erased from my memory just so I could discover it again, I would. There's a few books like that.
That's a great film as well. Just it's.
I really think they like. I don't think they will ever be topped. I don't think they will. I mean, I think they were just perfect.
Yeah, I was discussing this with somebody else the other day. The idea of them doing, I don't know whether you call it a reboot or just like a new attempt at it or whatever, but that would just be odd, wouldn't it? It just would.
I
not
know it would be
work.
viscerally offensive almost.
Yes.
What are you trying to achieve here? Like, this is why I didn't watch The Rings of Power. I was like, I just don't.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I
they're
got about
fine. I just don't
Yeah.
want to. You know.
I got about
Especially
halfway
because
through the
the
first
Silver.
season.
You did, eh? Yeah. Was
Yeah,
it worth it
had
or?
No, had to stop.
Yeah.
I've heard the
I,
second
for
season's
one-
better though, but
Yeah.
I, for one, welcome Logan Paul's version of Aragorn whenever it happens in about 5 years.
Gonna have Dwayne the Rock Johnson as
As
Boromir.
Gimli.
Oh,
As
yeah, Gimli. Yeah. Oh no, Kevin Hart as Frodo. That would. Who would Jack Black play in this?
Sorry,
Gandalf.
I've got to say that
Jack Black is Gandalf.
the stupid joke that just arrived in my head, I have to now share, because I did imagine, give me your name, Horsemaster, and I shall give you mine. And when AMA goes to speak, you can hit him with the, it doesn't matter what your name is! And that would...
Perfect.
Turns out Jumanji 7 is actually the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, I always say, I got the...
crossover hit with like a CGI Robin Williams as Gandalf or something. Just to make it extra offensive, yeah.
Oh, the most evil use of AI. Beautiful.
We found it. It was achieved. There's nowhere to go from here.
Oh, so I think we're going to have to go into the AI question that we've got now as well, because it's come up twice already.
It has, yeah.
In light of the advancement and the ease of use of AI, supposedly, in content creation, do you feel hopeful or fearful of our future robot overlords?
Oh God! I mean, I can answer. I mean, I could answer that question in the general sense of like, will we survive as a species, or I could answer it in the particular sense of like, what does it mean for writers? And I think just to not tug at the thread, I might just answer it specifically in terms of what it means for writers. I was obviously terrified about it when it first came out. But the longer it's been around, and I think large language models are already showing their limitations just as technology. Maybe they'll come up with some kind of quantum leap that'll be a whole other ballgame. But like, I think AI will probably end up being used for writing content that nobody really cares about, like website copy or like internal corporate documents or something like. But I don't think that it will ever. I haven't seen any AI art that has ever had any kind of soul or heart or like had me in any way interested in it as art. I mean, it's immediately identifiable as AI art because it's false. There's just no human there. There's no one you're connecting with. And art is about connecting with another person.
Yeah.
A writer in Canada that I really admire named Stephen Marsh, I think put it really well, where he compared it to a microwave. Like, yeah, you can microwave a frozen dinner for yourself in it, but you wouldn't invite anyone over to share that, right? Like, you wouldn't have a dinner party to come eat your frozen ready meal. Like, and I think that's what it is, right?
Severely overestimating English cooking.
I won't poke at that, but yeah, when your national contribution to world cuisine is fish, like deep fried fish and chips, like.
We can't even claim that. That was the Portuguese.
Was it?
Was that? That's funny. You even stole that. That's funny.
We steal everything, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good artists or great artists steal your antiquities, and then don't give them back. You can't be trusted with them.
Hey, they're so safe, man.
Yeah. One of the most impeccable instances of English conservatism and how it works that I've ever seen is in Oxford. There were obviously those Rhodes Must Fall protests years ago, where students were protesting to have the statue of Cecil Rhodes taken off Oriel College, quite rightly. And I went back there years later, and there's now a plaque, like a little informational sign at the foot of Oriel College saying, "Above you, you will see a statue of Cecil Rhodes." There were quite significant protests about it in 2012. Upon reflection, we have decided not to remove the statue. It's just so perfect,
Yep. That sounds like our country.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
just thinking what you're saying about, you can kind of, you even at a glance you can look at AIR and just know.
Yeah.
Do you think it falls into the same thing as the uncanny valley, where it's like it's something in your, like, just in your instincts that knows that it's wrong, that it looks like it was made by something in
No,
you?
yeah, I do. I absolutely agree. Like, I think it's just, I mean, it's like, we talk about the Turing test, right? And like, I don't think, yeah, it's uncanny. You just immediately know that there's something alien about it, something strange, something that isn't human. Like, there's something, this that yeah, it's like Get Out, like you've seen Get Out, where there's these white
Mm,
characters walking around in black bodies,
yeah.
and Jordan Peele just captures that unsettling quality of like this. You just immediately know this isn't right. This isn't human. This
Yeah.
is something deeply eerie and strange.
So I think I've got a follow-up question about this that just sort of spins off, which is that when I'm aware of people using stuff like ChatGPT or AI art in either content creation or artistic endeavors or even in their workplace, what they typically do is use that as a base and then sort of composite something from that or from multiple instances of AI art. So like I have a friend who works in IT. He does a lot of coding, and he
Yeah,
regularly just asks ChatGPT to just spit out the code, and then he goes through, checks it, edits it, makes it right, which is still 100 times faster than him writing it from scratch.
yeah, and I think that's valid. I mean, I think we will. Obviously, AI generates such incredibly strong emotions in the creative community right
Yeah.
now because of of the threat that it poses, and I have that same just visceral anger and loathing whenever I see it used. But I think what I find it loathsome when it's attempting to bypass the work of creative art, right?
Mhm.
Because who it really appeals to is the kind of hustle grind douche bro tech guy who feels entitled to the status of being an artist, but is so fundamentally mediocre that they will never actually create anything powerful, and they feel like it's a hack they can use to like jump right to the status of being an author or a
Yeah,
painter or something.
yeah.
I'm just
So
going to enjoy
that I
that.
find deep. Sorry.
Just going to enjoy your sentiment for a minute. Really.
Yeah,
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 for
that
sure.
was spot on.
Yeah.
That 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 I find like deeply offensive on a molecular level, obviously. But I'm sure there probably are ways in which AI can be legitimately used as a tool, like to assemble something something that's actually art. I don't personally want to.
Yeah.
And I actually had I had someone reach out to me a few years ago saying, "Hey, I've written an AI novel, and I got it to write each chapter, and it totally sucks. But do you want to help me make it good?" And I was like, "No, I just don't. I really don't. Like, I've just poured like all of like blood, sweat, and tears for several years into writing a book, and I'm not gonna do that." Like, it was anyway.
Yeah.
The guy was like, "Well, I look at it like, having a sous chef. Like, so what if someone else chopped the onions? It's still." And I was like, "No, that's just on a fundamental level." Just don't.
I've had a couple of approaches to like help train these AI like models before.
Yeah.
Like paid
Okay. Yeah.
positions to come
Wow.
and like drain your creativity into an AI. It's just like, ugh, no. It reminds me of those sort of almost like there's sort of like almost like sweatshop writing that used to happen. And hopefully it doesn't still happen, but it might do. But like for like Mills and Boons type stuff that just have people just churning out 10,000 words a day, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all icky. It's all very
I
icky.
mean, it is really icky. And like, will anyone miss those jobs? I mean, like I remember I was reading about a guy who, in the early days, like in that initial period where ChatGPT just flamed onto the scene, this guy had a tiny little business as a copywriter for a bunch of different, like six different companies, and they all fired him immediately, right?
Mm.
And then of course, and so he had to sort of totally reinvent himself, and he ended up and like recover from that. But then of course, within 6 months, a bunch of those companies had reached out to him, being like, "Hey, ChatGPT sucks. Do you want to come back?" And he was like, "No, I work in HVAC now. Like, screw you,"
Yeah.
And like I'm not sure. Like, maybe if AI does end up lapping up that sort of the shit work, then maybe it'll free writers and artists up to do more interesting things. I mean, that would be an optimistic way of looking at it.
The fear is that there are, you're a very intelligent person, and you're aware of the limitations of it and all the rest of it. I think the fear is that there are a lot of people that might not double check it, that might not.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that's a legitimate fear. We can never,
Yeah.
we should never underestimate the bottomlessness of human stupidity.
There was a real issue recently where obviously it doesn't know what satire is.
No.
So they pull data from articles and things like The Onion as though they are completely true. So if you ask a lot of these AI models how many rocks can I eat a day, it will tell you 3 to 5 is the recommended amount of rocks you can eat in a day because of an old Onion article. Like it's in such a weird place that there's a huge exodus happening at the moment from X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because they changed their terms of services to say that any art that you put on their platform, they can then feed into their generative AI.
Yeah.
You're giving like implicit consent for that.
And it's just fundamentally evil. Yeah.
Yeah. So a load of people went over to other stuff, but there was this really interesting point about it where someone said, so here's the problem you're going to have now is it's going to fall apart because the furries are the ones that control the art, but they're also the ones that control the internet because they're 60% of the tech sector. So you better hope you don't upset them too hard.
Yeah, you never anger the furries. I mean, so there's a furry hacker group that I think was hacking the Trump campaign a little while ago, and it was just the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Top notch.
Yeah, but I mean, X is one of those things that fundamentally I would like to see destroyed. I mean, I never liked it, even when it was Twitter. And then I guess for me it's been really jarring because my day job is with the government, and I was in one of the few careers where having a big active social media presence was actively harmful and you shouldn't do it. And then suddenly I had a book published, and then I had to pivot really quickly to like, I'm an influencer now, but I just don't like it. And I think social media's influence on society has just been fundamentally pernicious and destructive. And I would not miss it if it were to vanish entirely. Like, I actually think of this, like, after the Stockport riots, I was really angry, and I was like, this, like, social media should frankly, like, their assets should be seized, their executives tried for crimes against humanity, and the entire technology just regulated in the same way we regulate biological and chemical weapons, right? Like, it's just been so corrosive to our entire society. But then we can't escape it, right? And now and the people who are running these systems are fundamentally not on our side, right? Like Elon Musk has made that particularly clear. And and this is the problem, is that AI, this incredibly dangerous technology, is in the hands of people who just fundamentally, structurally, constitutionally don't care about social consequences. These are engineers, these are mathematicians, these are people who, just because something is cool, they think it's justified, and they hold the sort of humanities people that are the ones posing the questions about what it means and what its dangers are. They just hold that whole system of thinking in contempt, right? They have no interest in it, and they don't understand it. And you can see the influence that their power is having on our wider society. And I think that's what makes AI so pernicious. It's a tool that could be used in any number of ways, some of which are constructive and some of which are destructive. But it's in the hands of these people who really don't care about art or literature or music. Like, they just see it as content. The word content itself is so toxic, right?
Incredibly gross. The word, this idea of I don't know, to bring it back to movies again, but just this idea of like what most of what Hollywood's been producing for a long time now could be considered just content, because it's not art. Like the Marvel movies aren't art.
No, they're not. I really, if I never see another Marvel movie again, I will be happy.
It's this fueled disposability of like all creatives, isn't it? Like this idea that a song only needs to be popular for a week and then it's gone, and then they just shove another one out.
Yeah.
And like, having been in the album production cycle, there's a real quick turnaround. I think it was like less than 3 months after my band had brought out our last album when someone was saying, "When are we getting new songs?"
Yeah, music in particular, I think, is really subject to that, right? And that was always true. I mean, like, think of Motown, right? Like, what Berry Gordy literally used to do was if they scored a hit, they would make that band record like 5 more versions of the same hit until people
Yeah.
got sick of it and it stopped charting. But like, there's always been that tension between art and commerce, and that's normal. That's as old as art itself, I would say. But I think technology has just poured gas on the fire of that problem to the point where we're just grappling with issues. New issues are coming up faster than our ability to even process the last 5, right? Like by the time we're sort of coming to terms with one issue, we're being forced to deal with 5 others, and
And
just
the
the
whole time,
acceleration.
the rest of the world is on fire as well. So it's really,
Yeah,
it's
it's a
always
lot.
like, so why are you moaning about AI art when all this other stuff's happening?
Exactly. Like Palestine is being wiped out, and you're
Yeah.
bitching to me about AI art. Yeah, like I know what you mean.
So I'm going to follow this up with an incredibly dry question after that excellent series of answers. Thank you. What is your editing process? And I'm aware that that is amusing to go straight into that after that excellent conversation.
Bang the novel
That's
in
funny.
ChatGPT and say, make it more gooder. That's what we
Make
do.
it gooder. Make it more.
Make
Just more.
it more gooder.
I just keep typing more into ChatGPT, and then it's more. No, that's a good question. It takes me about like with a day job, it takes me about a year to draft a first draft. I would like just under a year. Like The Earth from My Flesh, the second Orbit book that's coming out next year. It took me about a year to draft. I can write quicker when it's my only job.
Yeah.
I got a grant a few years ago that gave me the opportunity to take 4 months off work, and I wrote 2 books in that time, but I had nothing else to do. So with a day job, it takes me about a year. And then what I do is I put it in a drawer and I forget, or in my hard drive, and I forget about it for a minimum of 3 months. I don't think about it. I move on to something else. I do whatever I can to forget that I even wrote the thing. The longer it sits in my drawer, the better. So when I pull it out, it should feel strange. It should feel like someone else wrote it. Like I should be able to recognize it as my own, but it should feel like me. It was me 6 months ago. Like if it feels weird to me, then I'm ready to edit it because I can see its flaws with a little more objectivity. Like I'm not as sentimentally attached to it. I can be like, okay, this is flawed in these ways, and this is how it has to be fixed. And then I give it a reread and do like a line, just sort of a first cut line edit where I sort of I'm just rereading and rediscovering the book. Ideally, I actually read it once and just take notes, and then I do a line edit. And then at that point, I do a structural edit where I'm sort of like, this doesn't work. This has to go here. This has to go there. I'm cutting. I find editing really, really scary. It can be frustrating and difficult, but really what it is scary because I don't know whether I'm performing surgery or whether I'm butchering the corpse. Like I really don't know. Like
butchering the corpse is a really good way of putting it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it maybe I'm saving the patient's life and performing corrective surgery, or maybe I've just killed the patient and now I'm just hacking at it with a chainsaw. And there's just no way of knowing, right? And that fear is very real. Having an editor now is really a gift because I have some I get to send my manuscript to someone else who can see it even more objectively, right? And the editor is always right. Whether I agree with her or not, she is always right. Like you can really see, you can see it happen with George R.R. Martin in particular. He's the big example, or J.K. Rowling, or when their editor lost power over them, the quality got so much worse, right? Like rambling, stupid digressions, enormous bloated books. Like the more successful the author gets, the less power the editor has, and the more sycophantic it just becomes. That's great, George. Yeah, we should totally have a rambling subplot about a Prince of Dorne who serves no purpose and then dies in fire for no reason.
That is so targeted. Oh, I love it. I love it.
That's great. We should leave that in, George. Keep it coming. Like that was the editor is always right.
Do you have a plan for keeping yourself humble in that regard?
I should probably. I mean, if I'm lucky enough to have that problem, Ben, I will let you know.
I know. I think I'll let you know. Actually, I think.
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Call me up and just say, listen, buddy, you think this is good, but that has to go.
I've got this image of you on like a golden throne.
The golden throne, dressed like the Bugs Bunny meme. I'm in like purple robes, just looking at you like, oh, tell me more about how you think this. No,
If we get there, we're bringing you back on, and we're just going to give you an unprompted dressing down, and then publish it immediately without any editing.
Public humiliation, yeah.
For the irony,
that is the way to send a message. The Romans do that. But yeah, I guess so. I guess what happens is like there's a structural edit, and then like my editor addresses like gives me her questions and points out her flaws, and then once that structural edit is done, and then it goes to copy editing and to proofreading, right? Which is way more extensive than you would think. Like it's not just catching typos. It's not just punctuation. Like in the Black Hunger, I remember there was some really fundamental like questions the guy had. Like, is this the word they would have used in 1876, right? Or like, actually, this town you've said is here is actually way over there. I mean, I was blown away by his encyclopedic knowledge of things that I just like. It's and then at that point, when it's through the copy editing and the proofreading is done, and by that point, I mean, I'm just kind of sick of the smelly thing and want it to go away. And I think actually that's the point at which you know the editing is done. When you're just sick of it and you just are like, okay, this thing, like, I can't physically look at this thing anymore. Then it's probably ready to show people.
Oh yeah, I think we met for the first time at FantasyCon recently, and my main takeaway from a lot of those panels was that kind of almost not a relaxing, but like an out breath that a lot of writers get when all of a sudden they have an editor, they have a line editor, they have a copy editor, because you just like, we can all work together on this thing to make it right. And
exactly.
You're no longer just the one person in there, at their desk, as you say, potentially butchering a corpse, and you don't know. Like all of a sudden you're in an environment where everybody is working towards the same goal, and they all believe that it can work.
Oh my God, absolutely. It's such a relief. And you trust the person and you build a relationship with them and they get to know you and you get to know them and you build, it's so much, it's an enormous relief. And like, with the Black Hunger, like obviously I racked up like the standard amount of rejections. Like I got like rejected by like 15 agents. And when I did get an agent, we were rejected 26 times by various different editors. And like, and fundamentally that's because it wasn't ready, right? It just wasn't ready. And I thought it was, but I like, as soon as I did get an editor, like when Nadia Sauer at Orbit did actually like take a chance on me, right? Like just immediately she was like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And like, and I was like, wow, what would it have been like if I had known this when it was on submission? Do you want to hear you want to hear the greatest story about the role of an editor that I've ever heard?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Lord of the Flies, right? I have this from my friend Tim Moore, who's worked in publishing for years. I want a source for it. But Lord of the Flies was rejected by pretty much every publisher in London, like consecutively. And a great editor eventually did, like how it got published was a great editor in London. I wish I could remember his name. He read it and went, yeah, this is really, really, really good, but you need to lose that first chapter where they're in space and their spaceship crashes and they fall onto the planet, because that's just really stupid and it doesn't serve the story. So just get rid of that first chapter and get rid of the space thing, and you've got a great book here.
What?
Literally, like...
That is news to me. That is fascinating.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's Lord of the Flies, and it did not need to be in space, really, and nobody asked for that. Like, but you just can't see these things sometimes when you're the writer, right? You're so close to it, and you have these darlings that you don't want to kill. But yeah, like we would never have known about Lord of the Flies if some editor hadn't pointed that out.
God.
I disagree. Put it back in space.
Lord of the Flies 2, Electric Boogaloo. Let's go.
Lord of the Flying Through Space.
Lord of the Flying Through Space. Space. William Golding's space opera. Jack becomes captain of Starship 96 and unleashes his jihad on a suffering galaxy.
Oh, Dune's great.
Yeah, how did we accidentally Dune? Right, no, I'm getting us back on track. We're having far too much fun. Who inspired you to start telling your own stories, Nick?
There's a number of levels on which I could answer that question. I think a book that so like when I was a little kid, like a little kid, I read The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and I just got lost in it. And like the ways in which that book shaped my whole worldview as a writer and as a person, like for good and ill. Like I think every artist, you guys probably have your own story, but like I think where it comes from is having an encounter with beauty and power, and also Tolstoy and like lots of the books I was reading as a kid, and having an encounter with beauty and power and like envying it and having that envy twist itself into the shape of the thought, I want to do that, I wish I could do that, right? And I think what made that like, and sometimes to that end, like the really great books to read are not always the masterpieces like Dostoevsky or Pratchett or the really great books, they can just floor you and make you think. Like they made me think like I could never do that in a million years. Sometimes the really important books to read are actually the garbage ones, like the trash, like Dan Brown. Like I remember reading The Da Vinci Code as a kid and being like, well, I could do better than this. Like I already am doing better than this, and I'm 12, right? Like,
oh, you're in the right place. We actually in the earliest days of this podcast, Dan Brown was the only person we were shitting on for this very reason.
so
and obviously he doesn't give a fuck because he's enormously successful.
Yeah,
but,
he's incredibly wealthy. The bastard.
The
yeah,
big stacks of money really drown out the sound coming out.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of my yacht's engines. Like, yeah. But
there's
actually,
to learn from something like that, though, isn't there? Like they are still
there
like
is.
That idea of just creating something that you cannot put down, even though you know it's garbage.
Yeah.
It's like there's a skill in that. I don't know whether it's artistic, but there's a skill.
There's a skill to it for sure, and absolutely. And so for me, I would say the book that directly led to the Black Hunters being created was actually The Terror by Dan Simmons, because it was in that perfect sweet spot of being really so good and so to my taste, but also within the realm of the attainable. Like I read The Terror and loved it and was completely blown away by it. But then I also thought I could do that, right? That is within my power. Like I'm sure I could, if I sunk some time into it, I could probably do this. And it was all there, the historical horror, the historical elements, the horror elements. Like I read The Terror, and then I read some of Dan Simmons' other books in that space, like The Abominable and Drood. Drood is incredible, and that was in that perfect sweet spot where it was like I love this, but I think I could also play at this level if I needed to.
Oh, that's such an exciting moment. I'm really your whole journey as a writer has just you going through the bits of it. I know we've not necessarily done it in chronological order, but it's been lovely to hear, because obviously in the previous episode we heard the level that you're hitting with a short story, and you've got this wonderful book out, and you've really built up to this, and it's really lovely to hear. And I'm just glad that you've got a good career, because you deserve it.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
The realm of the attainable is going to be a phrase that I keep with me, because I think that's a good perspective concept to hold. I like that a lot.
Thank you. I do find it useful, right? I mean, like I have to be clear-eyed about who I am as a writer and as an artist too. Like I will never be Dostoevsky, right? Like I'll never be, but I can carve out this little niche for myself, and I can live in my little corner of the store and do what is within my power, and do it well.
But also, who actually wants to be Dostoevsky? Who wants
to
be Hemingway? Like, you can.
They killed themselves or died.
They killed themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So, do you feel connected to a particular culture? And if so, how does it affect your writing?
Wow, that is a fascinating one, and kind of hits me in the feels at the moment. Because something I've been struggling with, and I think a lot of Canadian writers are struggling with. I don't know if it's also the case in other settler colonies, but if you're living in a settler colony, and I think America is kind of an exception here, because America has created a myth of itself and a sense of itself that transcends its origins. But if you're living in Canada, one of the traps we fall into is that like and I guess this is particularly true. I guess this is true of like white Canadian authors specifically. Um, one of the traps we're stuck in is that like we are descendants of a European culture that is fundamentally not our own anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like we have all these reference points in Europe that are that we have some claim to, but that they're not ours. But then it's difficult for us to write about cultures not our own in the 21st century for some good reasons and some that I don't like. I mean, I think if we're entering a century where we're only allowed to write about people exactly like ourselves, then we're entering a very dull century. But this is just sort of the political climate at the moment, particularly in Canada. And if we're not allowed to write about our neighbors, whether they're Punjabi or Cantonese or First Nations, if we're not allowed to write, if we can't write about ourselves, if we can't write about each other, then what can we write about, right? And like I mentioned earlier that I ran into the issue where I was writing The Black Hunger, that I was drawn to. I mean, I am drawn to Indigenous culture, right? I find it fascinating. I find it profound. I find it deeply relevant and meaningful to the world.
Yeah.
But I'm not Indigenous, and I have to leave space for Indigenous writers to tell their own stories and not exploit them for my own career. And that's right. That's correct, right? Like if that means that some books don't get written and some stories don't get told, then at least there's been space left for Indigenous people to write their own stories and tell them themselves. And I think but then again, the Black Hunger also draws very heavily on Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan culture in Mongolia and India, and it ranges all over the world. And so I had to it draws very heavily for its horror on Vajrayana Buddhism, which is Tibet's version of Buddhism. There's obviously it's the school of Mahayana Buddhism that prevails in Tibet. Yeah. And I think, there were a couple of reasons my aunt went to India in the 60s and married my uncle TC. She was teaching English in Tibetan refugee camps. And so a lot of my cousins and in-laws on that side of the family are Tibetan. And my cousin Ladin Tatong in particular is my absolute hero. She founded Students for a Free Tibet. She dropped a banner off the Great Wall of China in 2008, reading "One World, One Dream, Free Tibet." Are you guys Radiohead? Cool. You guys are Radiohead fans?
Bits and pieces, yeah.
You know how they perform with a Tibetan flag on their piano at concerts?
Yes. Oh, I didn't know that. Actually.
Yeah, she did that.
Oh, wild.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Like she's incredible. She's my absolute hero. And so like I've kind of grown up with Tibet and Tibetan culture in the background of my life since I was a little kid, and it meant a lot. And it meant a lot for me to be able to sort of but like delve into that, and it gave me some connection to it. But also, like as a white dude, I can't just be like I have Tibetan family, But I think part of the reason that it works, or that it's a little more possible, is because of the power relationship. Right, like I can't, like I'm a white Canadian dude who literally works for Crown Indigenous Relations. Like I have a very different power relationship to Canadian Indigenous culture than I do to Tibetan culture, right? And Tibet, I actually did have a sensitivity read done by a family friend named Jamyang Phuntsok, who's a very talented writer in India and the Tibetan diaspora. And I asked him about it, and he was like, honestly, like given how little visibility Tibet has right now in the political climate, and how powerful China is, most people in the Tibetan diaspora are just going to be glad you wrote about it at all, right?
Right. Wow. Okay, that's a very different take, isn't it? But
yeah,
really valid take.
It's a valid take, and everybody has their own, and sometimes the loudest voices shrieking. Sometimes we confuse the loudest voices shrieking on Twitter with what people actually think.
Totally agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
And I suspect that we're reaching a point where we're giving those voices on Twitter a little less power than we used to. And I think that writing about cultures not our own will eventually become less fraught than it is now. But I think that the conversations that we've been having over the past several years about the relationship of art to power and art to politics are really helpful conversations that we needed to have. And I'm optimistic that we will eventually push through to a place where these things can be handled sensitively and appropriately and respectfully and compassionately.
I like that. I think seeing them as foundational rather than a full stop is a very powerful thing going forwards.
I think
I certainly hope that's what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
This idea that we're getting to an approach where people aren't, just because someone's outraged on the internet, it doesn't actually matter that much. And if creatives are taking the time to understand cultures and not claim to be the sort of moderator of that culture, but just a mouthpiece and a perspective on it, I think that is something that
or to claim to be an authority on it. Yeah, like so there's a guy, I haven't seen it yet, but like I've been avoiding Goodreads, like, because it's just for my own sanity.
Good.
But there was a guy who was a white scholar of Tibetan Buddhism who posted a very long, in-depth Goodreads review, and apparently has also posted a YouTube video talking about this in more detail that I haven't found yet, but that I kind of want to. Basically, calling me appropriative and exploitative, and dissecting in a very real and impressive way my understanding of Buddhism. Like his diagnosis is quite accurate, and he did it in a very kind, compassionate, respectful way. So I wasn't actually angry or upset. And I think he also did say, like, you should read the book; it's good, right? But I sort of was thinking to myself, like, well, the thing is, Vajrayana Buddhism is something that you can spend your entire life studying and still not be an expert. And if you believe Vajrayana Buddhism, you can spend multiple lifetimes studying it and still not have achieved enlightenment, right?
Yep.
And I'm a novelist and not a scholar. At the end of the day, my job is to tell an entertaining story. I mean, I have a day job and a partner and like stuff that I like, as much as I might want to become an absolute authority on something, like that's just not going to happen, right? And I don't think that means that I'm not entitled to. And and in the Black Hunger, some people think there was sort of two extremes. One person just wrote snooze fest. Why are you boring me with all this stuff about like Tibetan Buddhism? And then on the other extreme, you had this guy who thought I had gotten it wrong, and that's just the nature of putting something out there in the world. Like it takes on an existence beyond you, and people have opinions on it that I have to remember are fundamentally not about me, right?
Yeah.
Like, these people don't know me. They're arguing with a version of me, like a public version of me that doesn't really exist,
And generally, they'll be arguing through an anonymized and amplified version of themselves. Like,
yes.
it's a really
that's
strange
also
thing
true.
about the thing about digital feedback, and I will talk about this all day if people want to listen, but this idea that through some degree of anonymity, people can pick which parts of their personality they amplify. So if they want to give off this like cool dude bro energy, they can choose to only have that bit of them online and crank it all the way up to 15, because
That's so true.
You can't hear their mum coming in to pick up their socks because they're 14 and they live at home. Like, you can't see that in their post.
No. Yeah.
So take everyone on the internet with a pinch of salt.
Absolutely. I
really like that. I really like that.
I remember hearing that about one of these like alt-right influencer losers, like Rouge V. I think he was like a pickup artist guy at one point, and now he's just gone full fascist. And then it came out that he was unemployed and living in his mom's basement. But he had projected this completely false image of like masculine power or whatever. And it's like, that's also as old as time. Like, Walden by Thoreau, right?
Aware of it. I actually haven't delved into any Thoreau at all. So
yeah, no, you're not really missing anything. And the reason why is that he wrote this book about like the serene beauty of the wilderness, and like what it was like to live in a cabin and cut himself off from society and achieve this spiritual purity out in the wild. But then you find out that his mother was coming to do his laundry and cook his meals every day, and the whole thing just collapses, right? Like, well,
absolutely.
Why am I wasting my time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just before we get too far from it, I just want to mention that the one voice saying that it was a snooze fest and that it was, you went too deep on a subject, and another voice saying you didn't go deep enough and you need to read more about the subject, probably means, as a novelist, that you absolutely nailed it, that you went right down the middle.
I hope so.
And that means that it was accessible for people that didn't have the time, but did have the mental capacity to be stimulated by what you were talking about.
I hope so, and you do need to be like, I actually do think that to an extent to which you do need to listen to your critics, right? Like,
yeah,
like if you're not listening to your critics and not internalizing their feedback, you're not growing as a writer. And like I am trying to sort of get rid of my tendency to do these sort of Baroque Gothic info dumps, where I sort of like spam you with all this like exposition about something that isn't really relevant to the story. And it was actually helpful in writing The Earth from My Flesh to sort of bear that in mind, to be like, I may find it fascinating that all of Napoleon's soldiers were coming down with ophthalmia, for example, when they were in Egypt, but does that serve the story? Probably not, you know?
Absolutely. Oh, this has been an absolutely excellent chat, and I feel like we should probably have you back on at some point very soon to continue the various chats the various Pandora's boxes that we've opened during this.
Yeah, I'd love that. I know this has gone on quite a while, and I hope it hasn't been too rambling. But I've had a lot of fun.
I've enjoyed it.
I knew this would be fun when I met you guys. So,
yeah, we had a great time at the con, didn't we? Yeah. So just again for the cheap seats, where should people go to keep up to date with your news?
Yeah, so you can find me on the hellscape formerly known as Twitter at the Naj Pullen, the NAJ Pullen, which I swear that like I actually created that handle when I was like 20 years old, and then now it's just useful. I'm on Instagram too. I'm much more active on Instagram, NAJ Pullen. And I have a website where I think you can find everything you need to find, nicholaspullen.com. I'm on Facebook too. I have a public profile there. Yeah, I mean, but I think the best place is to follow me if you're so inclined, and bear in mind that I'm not posting a huge amount, but our Instagram and Twitter for sure.
And of course, the darkened streets of Yukon.
Yeah, if you ever do find yourself in Whitehorse, then my condolences, and I will come pick you up and get you a hot drink.
I was going to say, because if you find yourself in Tombstone National Park this time of year, don't worry, you're already dead. It's fine.
You're already dead. Yeah, I should tell you. I should tell you guys the Dawson City story at some point. But like, I basically got trapped up there by a wildfire, and my friend and I ended up stuck there for like 4 days. And a friend of mine in my Oxford group chat was like, "But Nick, you've always lived in Dawson City." I just quickly, the commissioner's residence is the most in Dawson City. It's basically like an abandoned ghost town where everything is like an inhabited ghost town where everything is exactly where it was in 1896. Like it is still the Wild West. It isn't some ersatz tourist version of it. It's the Wild West. Like, and there's this building called the Commissioner's Residence that was the royal residence for the Commissioner of the Yukon, who was like the Governor General of the territory. But it only was like that. It only was for like 10 years. And then the gold rush ended and it just became this abandoned mansion that was then used as a mental asylum. So,
whoa, okay.
It's the most deeply haunted building I have ever seen in real life. Like just looking in through the windows was terrifying.
And you were stuck in close proximity to it by a wildfire?
For like 4 days.
Yeah, okay, that's beyond creepy. I love it.
So at some point, the Yukon horror novel will get written, but yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
And I'll let you.
Once more,
you know.
people need to make sure that they check out your debut novel, The Black Hunger, which is a spine-tingling queer gothic horror, and you can get it absolutely anywhere.
It's anywhere you want to go. I hope you enjoy it.
So thanks again, Nick. It's been wonderful telling stories with you and chatting with you. And
marvelous.
I think everyone will be quite glad that we're going to definitely ask you back at some point.
Thanks, guys. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, I really appreciated this.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
how do you come up with that shit, man?